you end up over allocating to Bitcoin, you most likely will end up with less Bitcoin. That's generally what happens. I get asked about the cycles a lot. Do I think the cycles are over? I tend to think that they might be at this point. If you're projecting like $1 million, let's say Bitcoin price, then you don't actually think you need to save as much today as maybe you do if we don't get that price as quickly as you're hoping that we get, right? In which case, sometimes people are spending more than they should as a result of living in this like fantasy Bitcoin world, which I do think will come to fruition, but the timeline again is that question. You can actually borrow against fiat products that have popped up that are Bitcoin tangential. So like you can get lending value on, let's say, like the MicroStrategy prefers or on MicroStrategy itself. Questions on top of what you do with that net savings that might just be Bitcoin, right? In which case, yeah, that does make some of my profession irrelevant, but doesn't make it completely obsolete. My hope is that more financial advisors will get involved and see, oh, this is actually a really unique way for us to help clients rather than just being, okay, we're doing the fiat financial planning thing. Everything's great. Thanks for having me, Robin.
Absolutely. Maybe before we get started with all the topics, give the people that listen and watch a little bit of a background of who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I have a financial planning practice. It's 11 years old as of this summer, and I've been involved in Bitcoin since 2013. But I haven't been advising on it for clients as long. I started advising on it in 2016. So I already felt like I was like a little bit behind in advising at the time. But like looking back on it, it's kind of funny now because 2016 to be advising on it was actually quite a long time ago. My practice is split between families who worked for me prior, like who before they knew about Bitcoin, who like have learned about Bitcoin through me, and then people who know me as someone who helps people in personal finance with Bitcoin who have come in that way. And so I've got like half a practice full of Bitcoiners who are like hardcore Bitcoiners who even have, 100% positions because that's what they want to have. And I have the more average financial planning client that you would imagine coming through as well, who has smaller Bitcoin positions, but they're still interested and, they're storing their own keys and doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. And they've been orange pilled along the way and have been learning and so forth and are still getting access to what I consider traditional financial planning advice. So like to me, Bitcoin is something that enhances and will certainly change the way things look over the next 10, 20, 30, 100 years or so forth, right? Like I do believe it's going to be the world's monetary reserve and that we're going in that direction. But in the meantime, we need to live in reality. And there are still some aspects of the traditional financial world that we need to just live with and adapt to. And then there are other aspects which I think will change as a result of Bitcoin being there.
Absolutely. And I think personal finance will always be around. It's this weird, and it probably was challenging for you where there's a lot of Bitcoiners, at least that I encountered, that say, oh, like I'm just 100% in Bitcoin and that's all I need to know about finance. And yes, if you get Bitcoin, you already understand a lot of important things about money. There's low time preference, mindset and all of that. But was it challenging to be in this personal finance world, which sometimes appears to be more fiat than it is, with Bitcoiners on like kind of getting the hate of both sides?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you do get hate on both sides, right? On the traditional finance side, for sure. I have people just think that I've lost. I don't know what I'm doing and I'm not acting in clients' best interests, which I don't obviously believe is the case. And then the other side, yeah, I get Bitcoiners all the time who are like, well, your job's not even going to exist. Why do people need you? And the reality is that for the average person, financial planning shouldn't be that big of a deal, right? We shouldn't need to have this fiat financialized world that like, even if you're just, saving a little bit of money and trying to make your way in the world, you shouldn't have to consult a financial advisor, right? You should just be able to save money and wait until your assets have grown to the point where you're now making different financial decisions and you actually want or need the help of a financial advisor. So that's where I see our roles headed. Like the more that Bitcoin sort of permeates the system, the more that I actually get to see complicated, complex, interesting problems. This is what humans are meant to be doing rather than the sort of like the basic stuff. Like everyone still in a Bitcoin world or not, like in a fiat world or a Bitcoin world, you still need to have income coming in and have the expenses be less than your income or at least match your income if you're in a retirement state, right? And then have whatever is at the bottom, right? Net savings. And so that's just going to be the way that it is. That equation doesn't change whether you use fiat or Bitcoin, right? And then from there, it's like, okay, what am I doing with this money? Am I saving it for the long term or am I saving it for the short term? Do I just want to save it or do I want to invest it, right? There are also questions on top of what you do with that net savings that might just be Bitcoin, right? In which case, yeah, that does make some of my profession irrelevant, but doesn't make it completely obsolete, right? Because then there's going to be a subsector of the population whose net worth and assets are going to grow, and they're going to have all sorts of other complicated problems and things that come up, or things that they want to do that they're not sure how to fund and so forth, in which case they would turn to somebody like me, and hopefully more advisors, right? Because I can't handle all of the questions in the world from everybody, right? My hope is that more financial advisors will get involved and see, oh, this is actually a really unique way for us to help clients, rather than it just being, okay, we're doing the fiat financial planning thing and that we're relevant because fiat makes things complex, because we're actually providing a good service.
It's interesting because I don't know a lot of financial planners in Bitcoin. I know I had probably 4, maybe 5 on them on my channel, but not a lot. So from 600 guests, that says a lot, I feel like.
Yeah, I like to make the Arrested Development joke that there are dozens of us, and I actually don't even think there are dozens of us. I think there are less than dozens of us. But yeah, we're out there. We have a little network, actually, where we have the Bitcoin Financial Advisors Network, and there's a few of us on there who are all kind of catering to different Bitcoin clientele. So people can check that out. It's bitcoinfinancialadvisorsnetwork.com.
Interesting. What would you say is, for the people that don't know what financial advisors do, what is the current state of the traditional financial advisors in a fiat world? And then maybe we can explore a little bit how Bitcoin will change that.
Yeah, sure. So in the traditional fiat world, what happens, right, is that we're all on this hamster wheel where we need to work as hard as we can to save money, right? And we're doing that because our money is melting in front of our eyes, and we have a consumerism problem, and we're always trying to figure out how to save and then also get ahead. And so in the traditional fiat world, what I see financial advisors' role is saying, hey, I'm going to help you your savings, your money, into investments as quickly as possible, so that that money doesn't melt in front of your eyes, right? You still need to have all these other, traditional financial planning tactics where you have an emergency reserve, and maybe you're allocating different places, or you're taking advantage of a company retirement plan or whatever it is, and your financial advisor should be able to help you with that too. But their main role is, as an asset allocator, is to take that net savings and then to help you invest it in a way that makes sense given your risk tolerance, time horizon, unique circumstances, and so forth. Whether or not the industry is doing that, we could argue about, right? There are going to be some advisors who are great, right? There's going to be a bell curve. There'll be some people who are doing that in the middle and they're fine. There are going to be some advisors who are terrible and that you shouldn't go to, but tend to get clients anyway somehow because they're good at sales. There's going to be the top of financial advisors who are not only doing that, but they're also helping their clients with other financial planning issues and things that are coming up, or tax planning and estate planning. And that's the traditional world. In the Bitcoin world, I think you're going to have those top tier financial advisors still who are handling all of this. But the difference is that the asset allocation is not going to be as prevalent as it has been in the past. In the past, you didn't have an asset like Bitcoin to just hold money, to hold long-term savings. And so, right, a lot of investment is going to become a little less relevant when you have a long-term savings vehicle. Right now, if you're just in traditional fiat, there's no decision point there, right? It's either I hold money and it melts, or I put it into some sort of S&P 500 index type fund thing, right? Where at least it'll grow at, 7% real terms and I'll be fine. And so that's kind of what has been pitched at people for the last, 30 years, I would say, since index funds came out. And that governments have even been moving people towards these low cost ETF or index style investments so that people aren't going to being taken advantage of from fees and so forth. But that doesn't necessarily solve the problem, right? The problem in and of itself is that people are being pushed beyond their risk tolerances to invest in a way that they might not feel comfortable with. And so with Bitcoin, right, it flips the script where you can say, okay, I just want to hold money. And then from there, I'm going to decide, okay, do I make investments or do I continue to hold money and then do planning around the money that I hold, passing it to the next generation if I've really accumulated a lot of money, retirement planning tactics to make sure that I'm getting the income that I need in retirement and I'm still preserving my assets, charitable giving or so forth, right? There's all sorts of trusts that people can use, especially if they've accumulated a lot of Bitcoin, to actually take advantage of the tax laws as they stand today, and then also be charitable while they're still getting an income. So there's just a lot of options out there in the traditional finance world that you can put on top of Bitcoin that I think that advisors can really help with. But that's not going to be for the average Bitcoiner, right? For the average Bitcoiner who just wants to save money and they're just starting out, or they're young or whatever it is, right? They're just going to need to have income coming in, spend less than they make, and start saving, and go from there and see what they actually need from a financial advisor.
I think this is great because if you, that's a simple rule, especially when you're starting out, you just have one income stream and you have one savings device, which is Bitcoin. hopefully, and then you just pour the excess income in there, and you save, and you're good to go. But I think as life goes on, life gets more complicated than that, as I heard, and as I already experienced a little bit, where what happens when there's a company getting involved? What happens if there's different? Maybe you want to move somewhere. Like there's many different life complications coming your way, where like, oh, okay, if I know about that, this makes this easier. And there's also this really big, and I'm not a big fan of it, but this big tax bureaucracy thing, where if you know what you're doing in there, you can really save a lot of money. I learned a lot about taxes when I went from being employed to being self-employed, and now founding companies, so being more an entrepreneur. So like, you learn so much about the system, where like you look back 2 years and you're like, wait, like there's a better way, and there's that's how this works, and you're like, oh, okay. So there's a lot of I think in the beginning you said it so nicely. We have to deal with reality, and of course we can now pretend that there's no more fiat, and there's no more tax bureaucracy, and there's no more government, and there's just you and your Bitcoin. but unfortunately we are not quite there yet, and I think navigating that will be really interesting. I'm just very interested in, like, if we are ever getting to a state where there's like Bitcoin and nothing else. And I think one thing that maybe people also don't plan to is, if we get to a Bitcoin world, there will be an incentive to do investment again, because Bitcoin is matured, and it will still grow. Like it will still grow a little bit with the deflationary force. I mean, we're talking now like tens of years, hundreds of years out, maybe like 200 years out, where Bitcoin is so mature, where it's no longer growing. It's just like growing with the deflationary force of the monetary, of our human invention, craft, or whatever you want to call it. And then you have an incentive again to invest in companies, and to invest in maybe real estate, invest in other things again, because Bitcoin is kind of matured, and you have again an incentive to invest in other things. I don't know. It's a really interesting thought experiment for me, where how does personal finance look like on a full-flexed Bitcoin standard?
Yeah, for sure. I think in some ways we're already there. So, and not because we're already on this Bitcoin standard, like you mentioned, but just because there are now financialized products that have come out that are tangential to Bitcoin, right? And so, like, a financial advisor like me, or really anybody, right? You can't give financial advice on investment products without being a financial advisor, and without having, maybe the rules will change in the future where there won't have such, stringent oversight from the government into my profession. But for now they do. So my hands are very tied when people come to me and they just say, well, I don't want to go to your financial planning practice because I don't need all that stuff that you're offering. I just need, like, pointed investment advice. Should I own, the MicroStrategy preferreds, or should I just own Bitcoin? I'm like, well, that's literally an investment. Like, my hands are tied. Once you start asking me about, these preferred stocks, all of a sudden I'm quote unquote relevant in the industry again, according to these Bitcoiners who are saying that we're not relevant. And the reality is that we are, right? Even questions on the ETF. The ETF is a product while Bitcoin is not, right? MicroStrategy is a product while Bitcoin is not. And then all of these other things have come out where people are asking about, like Misty, or I don't remember what the other one is. And these are, again, financialized products. And so I totally see what you're saying, right? I think that that in general, people want to outperform. And so if you're getting like Bitcoin returns, you're getting used to Bitcoin returns. Now you're trying to think, okay, how can I outperform Bitcoin, even though, like, I know Bitcoin is like the main balance sheet asset that I hold, right? But what else am I going to hold on top of that? So I think in some ways we are there. And I do agree that in the future that we will continue to be there. And I think there will actually be like a wider plethora, really, that people can invest in on top of Bitcoin as a result of that. This being the beginning of Bitcoin treasury companies, in my opinion, and that, like, from there it won't just end, right? I don't know necessarily what the next thing will be, right? But I'm sure that there'll be something else that's built on top of the Bitcoin ecosystem that people will want to be involved in. And so, yeah, I think it'll be kind of funny to see. Maybe it does come full circle, where all of a sudden financial advisors had this sort of small time period where we weren't that relevant because people were just saving in Bitcoin, but then all of a sudden it's making a comeback. comeback is already happening. It was kind of funny. I remember thinking even 3 years ago, oh, maybe I won't need to be registered anymore. Maybe I can just like become a Bitcoin consultant and I just have clients who all hold Bitcoin and I do financial planning outside the system and I don't need to worry about my regulator anymore. And within a couple of years that was done because people have tons of questions about all the new stuff that's coming up.
What are actually the most common questions you get from Bitcoiners?
Yeah. Okay. So, I always get asked price projections, which I don't like to give because I don't know, obviously, like I can shake my crystal ball and if I could, then I would, so I always get asked that. I get asked about the cycles a lot. Do I think the cycles are over? I tend to think that they might be at this point, but I'm also, that's not a hill I'm going to die on. Like, I'm not going to tell people like, I'm 100% sure the cycles are over this time. I do think though, compared to past cycles, that this is starting to feel like maybe we have more natural buyers in the market. And because less supply is coming onto the market, that it's less of a supply shock than it has been previously and so forth. And that because Bitcoin has become such a large asset class, that maybe now we are starting to become into the more mature area of Bitcoin where we don't have these cycles. But again, I'm open to being wrong. So you can, people can send their hate mail or not. I get a lot of questions about borrowing against Bitcoin and whether or not it makes sense. And I tend to see that as something that's kind of more individual use casey rather than like blanket, yes, you should borrow. People just don't like to sell their Bitcoin. So what I found is that I get a lot of questions from Bitcoiners around how can I still have all this Bitcoin, but do all these things that I actually want to do because I have now, amassed a bigger net worth than I thought I'd ever have. And I've been, delaying buying, a new shirt. I've been delaying buying, putting an engine in my car, even though I've, had the check engine light on for 2 years and things like that, where you're like, it's time. It's okay. Like just sell a little bit and fix your engine, make sure your kids are driving in a safe car, that kind of stuff. And then I also get on the other side, people who already feel like we're living in this Bitcoin world and like their situation is not like, it's not reality. Because if you're projecting like $1 million, let's say Bitcoin price, then you don't actually think you need to save as much today as maybe you do if we don't get that price as quickly as you're hoping that we get, right? In which case, sometimes people are spending more than they should as a result of living in this like fantasy Bitcoin world, which I do think will come to fruition, but the timeline again is that question. So, yeah.
That's an interesting one. I never thought about that. Because I usually get Bitcoiners that want to save more and are like, tending to be more greedy than they should be, not too spendy. Maybe that's just my bubble in my environment. But I get a lot of those like, I want more purchasing power, but I don't want to sell my Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Like it's like you can only have one of that, and even if you borrow against it, like you also. There's a cost to that. If it would be completely free, everyone would do it. If there's no risk and no disadvantages to that, like then it would be an easier call. Like, oh, of course, borrow against the Bitcoin. It's free money. Like there's no free money.
Exactly. I think that people compare, like they're like, okay, they're projecting out what they think Bitcoin is going to do in the next, 5 years or so, but they're not taking into account that these loans are short term. And so these loans tend to be anywhere between 6 months to 1 year. Have to roll it, right? And margin calls are very tight. And so like in the traditional finance world, I actually think they do a better job with this with margin calling. The margin calls come around 2:00 and they give you time basically to put money into the account before they sell you out. Whereas in the Bitcoin world, they basically send you an email and they sell you out. So it's kind of been shocking to me to see that, and that all of the companies have moved in that direction who are doing the lending, like they don't give any kind of wiggle room on, and in that case, it's like, okay, then you need to either be putting up a lot more collateral than you otherwise would be to take a smaller amount of a loan so that you don't put yourself in that situation. But then you're putting up collateral in a place where potentially they can rehypothecate, right? Because you don't, it's not a multi-sig loan like maybe would be a better way of doing it. And so there are definitely more risks associated, I think, with borrowing against Bitcoin than borrowing against fiat. However, in the fiat world, what's kind of come out now, which I find really interesting, is that you can actually borrow against fiat products that have popped up that are Bitcoin tangential. So like you can get lending value on, let's say, like the MicroStrategy prefers or on MicroStrategy itself, or let's say than what you could get for a traditional financial product. But you're in like the traditional fiat world where lending terms might be a little bit better and so forth. And you might have a little more flexibility. So, but again, if you're just a hardcore Bitcoiner who doesn't want to sell your Bitcoin, now all of a sudden you'd have to sell your Bitcoin to be able to own this fiat product. It gets it gets a little complicated and convoluted, right? And it kind of puts, I think, Bitcoiners in a place where they're like, this isn't really what I'm comfortable with, right? I wanted to hold Bitcoin. I don't want to hold a receivable on Bitcoin or whatever else it is. So, I think for like the traditional financial world where people have been doing this and they just allocate a little bit to Bitcoin and it's part of their portfolio and they're borrowing, it's not as big of a deal as somebody saying, okay, I'm 100% Bitcoin and now all of a sudden I'm going to like own the ETF so I can borrow and all these other things.
It's for me very interesting because the borrowing against your Bitcoin right now, all the products that I see are not only short term, as you mentioned, they are usually like 12 to 18 months. This is the longest that I've seen, which is very short term in my opinion. They are also high interest rate. Like they have 12, 13, sometimes over 15% of interest rates, where I'm asking like, couldn't you get a better loan just without borrowing against your Bitcoin, not taking the risk of losing your Bitcoin and still getting the liquidity right now? And if you can't get a better loan, maybe you shouldn't borrow against your Bitcoin in the first place. Those are the thoughts that I have with that whole topic of like, why should you borrow against a Bitcoin when you can just get a traditional loan? And if you can't get a traditional loan, maybe there's a reason for that.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more. I don't think it is a good practice to be borrowing for discretionary spending. Like I think people like to look at it because they're like, okay, if all the math works out, then yeah, I end up with a lot more Bitcoin if I'm spending in fiat terms. But you are rolling this loan, right? So in year one, let's say you spend 100 grand, and you borrow against your Bitcoin. In year two, when you roll the loan, you're rolling that 100,000 because you spent it, right? It's not like you're gonna get that back somehow later. Like you're just using it as discretionary spending. So now you're rolling the 100. You're paying a fee to roll it, and then you're taking out another 100, right? And you're doing that every single year. So your loan is compounding. And like the idea basically in people's minds is that, okay, Bitcoin's compounding faster and therefore I'll net out better. But you might not. Like you might end up in, I don't know, in year 5, market takes a huge dip. And all of a sudden now you're sold out of all your Bitcoin and now you can't borrow anymore, right? So like there's one of these things where it's like we're rolling this loan and it keeps getting bigger, right? You might end up worse off. And so I do tell that to people in general that like if you end up over allocating to Bitcoin, you most likely will end up with less Bitcoin. That's generally what happens.
Yeah. And I had that question in my mind so long in the beginning of the year, and I came to peace with just selling Bitcoin if I need to, because I am in a position where 70 to 80% of my income is in Bitcoin, but only around 10 to 20% of my expenses, maybe 30%, depending on the month. Some freelancers don't always want the Bitcoin thing. So I naturally have to sell Bitcoin that I get in the same month that I get it to cover fiat bills. Like that's a very natural thing. And I postponed it for as long as I possibly can. Like I had like overdrafts on my bank account. I was like, oh, like maybe one more month. And at some point I was like, okay, either I borrow against my stack or I sell some. And I just couldn't borrow against my stack. That it just felt wrong. And I was just like, okay, the accumulated Bitcoin, if there's like, if I get more income than I have expenses, so I can stack sats. Why do I care that I sold some? Like I still have more Satoshis at the end of the month than in the beginning of the month.
Yes,
like why do I care that I sold Bitcoin away? I still have more Bitcoin at the end of the month. It's just money at that point. But I really like, this was like struggling 3-4 months to figure out like how can I mentally spend Bitcoin, because it was so ingrained in me not to sell my Bitcoin. How I came up with a solution, I don't know how you do it or how you advise to do it. I just made a specific spending wallet. like let's literally, there's money coming in, and then there is money going out, and the thing that stays above goes to my savings Bitcoin. It sounds weird, but it really helped me go over this hump of I don't want to sell my Bitcoin.
No, I think it's a great way of approaching it. mental accounting actually. Some people just need it, where you just need extra, like you need sub accounts and so forth. People even do it in the fiat world, where they have like they have their vacation savings, and they actually like split that out as their own thing that they are like putting money into, and then when they actually spend it, they feel better, as opposed to just accumulating it with all their other savings. Then it feels like you're spending your savings. And so it's one of those things where like, yeah, our mind does actually play tricks on us. And so if like you're going to spend that money, which it sounds like you do, then yeah, it should be earmarked for spending, because it does make it easier to then see, okay, this is what I really intended to allocate towards savings. And now I don't have to feel bad about the fact that I'm spending what I'm supposed to be spending, because the whole reason why you're working, I'm assuming, is not just to save, but also to fund your current life, right? Yeah. Otherwise, I just saw this video of this guy who literally spends no money because he works for some like they do like kitchen equipment, and he gets a lot of kitchen equipment for free, and sometimes it comes in boxes. And he literally made a bed out of the peanuts that they packed like the pot in, and he took the peanuts out and he filled it into like this wooden thing, and he put a tablecloth on top of it, and he called it his bed. I'm like, what kind of life is this? Like you're trying to save as much as possible, but also like you're literally sleeping on plastic. It's like I don't know. In my opinion, I'm like, there's a balance to all things, right? If we're too far towards savings, then we get into trouble. If we're too far towards spending, then obviously we're going to get into trouble, right? Somewhere in the middle, where we're saving appropriately, we're making sure we can provide for ourselves, but we're also providing for today, which I think in general is also important, right? You do need to feed yourself. God didn't put us on earth to, sleep on peanut packings and not eat real food, right? We're here to like change the world and make the world a better place, but also like to live and to live comfortably, like to the best of our ability. So I think that in all things, it's really a balance. And sometimes it's hard because in the Bitcoin world, especially, right, we tend to be on an extreme in general. And I think that that's how people end up becoming Bitcoiners, is because they are on these extremes and can gravitate like this new kind of life-changing money, especially as early as it is, but also because we tend to be on that extreme, we tend to do other things in extremes, and sometimes we need a little bit of help moderating our behavior.
Yeah, and this is something I think a lot about that, because I think saving is probably not like depends on what your goal is and what your outlook is, but I actually try to have the life I want to live already, and then see like, okay, how can I get more without sacrificing things? So like, what I mean with that is, when I started the whole podcast, I was ready to spend off my stack, and I was like, okay, I'll go on this journey now, because I did not know if I make money with that at all. It was like just like, okay, let's go on this journey. Luckily enough, I had every month a little bit extra income, so I never had to spend down on my stack, which I was prepared to do for about a year. And since then, I just grew the business and grew everything. But instead of just keeping it, I always reinvested. So I started with like just me, just barely, just barely scraping by. And now we are a 4-person team that works on the podcast and the companies alike. And I still make personally the same thing that I made in the starting when the podcast was barely there, just because I take the thing that I need to save a few more extra sats for my personal thing and reinvest the whole thing. So I figured out right now, like, okay, this is how much I need, and everything else I can reinvest, and maybe it gets bigger, maybe everything explodes. I don't care, but I make enough to live, and everything else I can reinvest in the community and potentially in bigger income down the line. But yeah, I don't need more money right now.
It's a good way of approaching it. Yeah, it's amazing. Your business has grown a lot.
I don't know. It's just, yeah. I have an interesting one, because you probably get a lot of questions that you, as with the price and the cycles, that you're like, oh, like I don't even care about answering them too much. What are some of the questions that you don't get often, but you would wish to get more often?
Yeah, I love that question. So I think it's really going to depend on the stage that a Bitcoiner is at. But like in my planning practice, like we were starting to have Bitcoiners who have been involved for a long time, and where they have very sizable Bitcoin stacks, and then thinking about how we're going to be approaching it so that maybe they don't have to be working crazy hours anymore. Maybe they could scale back and actually start using some of this Bitcoin in a way that is I guess, palatable to a Bitcoiner, right? It's hard for Bitcoiners to sell their Bitcoin. And so, like some of that involves some trust planning, which I've found to be really interesting, where we're helping clients basically either gift to the next generation already to their children, but also be able to take a stream of income from it. There are trusts that allow you to do that. Or similarly, we're creating like charitable trusts where they know they're going to be charitable anyways. And so there are different types of charitable trusts where like you can either leave the remainder to charity or give a stream of income to charity, and then like the remainder stays with the family. And so using these like traditional finance vehicles to actually help people now who are in these complicated financial planning situations. We brought that a lot, especially this year, given how much the price has increased over the past year, that like now some of these planning tactics are actually really interesting for people. The other thing is, I guess, balancing the needs of today. Maybe you're not necessarily in trust planning situation, but maybe it still makes sense to start looking at some of the income generating assets that are out there, as opposed to only stacking a Bitcoin, right? And so for some people right now, it might make sense to hold other assets and so forth to get a stream of income on it while they're still preserving the majority of their assets in Bitcoin. And then viewing that on a case by case basis of like how much income is needed, what are we trying to replace, how can we do it, and then thinking about it in terms of, not costing too much in taxes, trying to be really kind of mindful about smoothing out any kind of tax burden that can result, as opposed to like selling Bitcoin or adding to something else and so forth. So there's a lot of different like interesting planning things I think that have come up as a result of just the Bitcoin price going up in general. So I like working on that stuff. Obviously, I find that really, really interesting. And then the basics. I think always going back to the basics is really important. I do often feel like I repeat and that I'm like a broken record, that, you have to have net savings. But people need to be reminded of that. Even Bitcoiners. I feel like, like what I see in the Bitcoin world a lot of the time is that we're not saving as much, maybe. Sometimes people are oversaving, and I'm not really talking about these people, right? And there's plenty of people all over, I think, the Twitter space or the X universe, where they're influencers of some sort, and they are oversavers, and they're very proud of it, and they want people to know about it, and that's great. The average person, though, sometimes thinks of it as like, okay, Bitcoin's going to grow quite a lot, so I don't necessarily have to save as much, right? You can think about it from the opposite standpoint. And I would say that, like, and people call me bearish for saying this, but I think that you shouldn't rely on that. Like, I think that you should still use tried and true financial planning principles where you're still saving 20% of your pre-tax income as much as you can, right? Like, there might be some years where you can't do that and so forth, which is why you should still be focusing on doing it in the years that you can, or even saving a little bit more, so that when something comes, like a big year comes up, that you can handle it. And also, like, making sure you have an emergency reserve. Bitcoiners hate this. It's like their least favorite thing. It's like they're allergic to holding a fiat reserve. But the reality is that the fiat reserve saves people time and time again when unexpected things come up. And so, like, maybe if you've got a huge Bitcoin stack and it's not a big deal and you don't care to just sell a little bit when an emergency comes up, then fine. But for the average person who really is trying to diligently stack and so forth and is saving 20% of their pre-tax income or whatever it is, the emergency reserve is going to save them. Like, if their car breaks down, or if they've got a hot water heater leak in their home, or like all of a sudden their job situation changes and they realize they actually do want to, like, maybe the next best step is to start a business, right? It doesn't always have to be a bad thing that happens in your life that makes you use your emergency reserve and so forth. And so I think it's really important to consider that. And your emergency reserve can be based on your risk tolerance. You don't have to have a years long emergency reserve, right? You can just have, 3 months worth of expenses just to make sure that you can get through any sort of situation that comes up.
I do love the watches from Coin Vigilante, but today I have a very special message, not from me, but from the CEO himself, Carlos from Coin Vigilante. Let's hear him.
To all the Robin Seyr podcast community, I'm Carlos Estrada from Coin Vigilante, and we're sponsors of the show, and we're going to give you a very special discount exclusive to you, 10% off your order at coinvigilante.com when you use Robin at checkout. We have really nice watches that you guys can buy right now for 10%. This is a transparency edition, beautiful watch. These watches are worn in over 55 countries and counting. This discount is just for you, exclusive to the Robin Seyr podcast. We have limited editions. We have limited productions. These watches come in very nice packaging, boxing material, and they are collector's item for Bitcoiners only. Enjoy the discount. Thanks for supporting the show and Coin Vigilante.
I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC-free Bitcoin. That's why I use simplemining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. James Jack brought that up to me. I think he does it like that. He said he has gold actually as his cash, which is an interesting strategy because like gold is not as likely to fall as sharply as Bitcoin does at this point. It's still volatile and you still have a like hard asset. How do you look at like emergency funds that are not cash, but like a lot more short-term volatility exposed and not as short-term volatility exposed as Bitcoin is?
I don't consider it an emergency reserve. So like, I would not use that as an emergency reserve. Again, if he wants to take extra risk and call that an emergency reserve, then fine. But I don't think that the average person should be considering something like that an emergency reserve. Emergency reserve is literally something where you have access to it very, very quickly. So for most people, that's just going to be, even like if you want to keep it on the smallest side, that you have one in like a savings account that you can easily access, where if you need to make a bill pay that day, you can, right? For maybe if you want to extend that further, now we have like these preferred products out there where, and this is not investment advice by any stretch, and I'm not telling people to do this because I don't know their situation. I don't want people to be making investments, but you could consider this if you already have that 1 month that, okay, I have another, let's say 2 months and something. Some of these prefers that are yielding more. And that way, if I do need to sell it, I can sell it and transfer it, right? And be able to move it into my account within 3 days, right? And so there are other options out there right now besides, let's say, just holding Bitcoin or holding gold or something that's a lot more volatile, in my opinion, to make these things work. For most of my clients, though, we just use a high yield savings account. And it works just fine. And then they allocate the rest of their assets aggressively, or however they want to do it. And we help with that, obviously. But I think that like people need to get it out of their head that they're trying to get ahead with their emergency reserve. That's not what it's there for, right? The emergency reserve is there for like, I don't know, you slip and you break your hip, right? And you're out of work for 3 months. I mean, it's like, who couldn't possibly foresee that? But like, all of a sudden now you're selling your Bitcoin stack. And what if Bitcoin's down 50% when you're doing that? Now all of a sudden you have less Bitcoin, or same thing with gold, right? Or you can't get the money when you need it because for whatever reason, like, you can't access your hardware wallet because you've slipped and broken your hip and it's hard to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm putting scenarios out there that are maybe far-fetched, but I've seen these things happen, where people lose their job or they break a bone or their kids need something or whatever it is, right? Some sort of emergency comes up and people are very grateful when they have that cash there. And in the meantime, yeah, it is annoying to look reserve and be like, why do I have that? I don't really need that. But the reality is that you should, like, the best case scenario is that you kept a little extra cash around and nothing bad happened to you. And yeah, fine, you didn't get, double digit returns on your emergency reserve. But if something were to happen to you, I guarantee you'll be glad that it was there.
Yeah, it's this hard thing where Bitcoiners look at that stack and it's like, oh, this stack could be 0. Like whatever Bitcoin. And you're like, oh, that could be, if Bitcoin goes to 2 million, that is then, oh, this much. So I think Bitcoiners make that calculation sometimes too much. And people bring this pizza example because it's so extreme, always up of like, oh, like, see, he spent 10,000 Bitcoin on 2 pizzas. Yeah, but if he adopted a Bitcoin standard or was kinda conservatively, aggressively on Bitcoin and just converted like 20 or 30% of his portfolio to Bitcoin, he probably has like hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins right now, maybe even like in the million. Probably not, but like it is possible if you spend 10,000 Bitcoin on 2 pizzas. So they only look at that one expenditure and not like, okay, what does it mean if he spends 10,000 Bitcoin on 2 pizzas? It probably means that he has hundreds of thousands of them if he's, if he believes in Bitcoin and is convinced in Bitcoin and he doesn't lose it, all those things that usually happen to people that are early into Bitcoin. And the same
We're
way
making that decision though with every expenditure, right? If, like, when you just go and buy pizza with fiat, what you're saying is, I'm not going to put this $20 into Bitcoin right now. I'm going to go eat these pizzas. So anyone who did that in 2011, when he, set the for those pizzas, has basically done the same thing, and they didn't know it.
100%, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I'm sometimes very annoyed at those people that say, "Oh, you don't sell your Bitcoin, you end up like the pizza guy," and I'm like, the pizza guy does just fine. Like I believe he has a lot of Bitcoin and he's doing very good right now, because he seemed to have understood it. And so will you in 10 years if you have most of your money in Bitcoin, get a few sats more each month and just spend the Bitcoin that you have here and there if you actually need it. So I'm getting frustrated with that question because I'm a big proponent of spending a Bitcoin, using it as money. It's not just there to like hold on to it and die with a bunch of Bitcoin. So you actually should enjoy it. Bitcoin is there to get more life into, get more life into your life and not more life into Bitcoin or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you believe in God, but I do believe in God, and I do incorporate that into my everyday life. And I believe that God provides, right? And so at the end of the day, God is going to provide for me. God is going to provide for my children. God is providing for me right now, right? My children are reliant on me, and therefore God is also providing for my children. But God will also in the future, right? If I believe that God is benevolent and loving of all of his children, then of course he's going to provide for my children, right? Of course, he's going to put us in the situation that we need to be in that will bring us closer to him, but also make our life meaningful and also help us grow as people, right? And so that's like, I feel like we have to make decisions, right? And we have to make our own efforts and so forth. But at the end of the day, right, the source of all of this is from above. And so people can deny that by, saying that we trust in Bitcoin or whatever it is, right? And they can put their trust somewhere else if you're not going to, believe in the creator and so forth. But the reality is that, like, we will all be provided for, right? And that our level of effort is like all that we can do, and what remains at the end of the day is really up to God. So even if, right, and Bitcoiners hate when I say this, so maybe I'll get some hate mail from this. Even if you are a super saver, literally a super saver, doing everything, living on packing peanuts, whatever it is, right? Even if you're doing that and not spending any of your Bitcoin, right? At the end of the day, if you there could be some sort of extraordinary event that God puts into your life that you lose half your stack or whatever it is, right? Like, these things happen to people, where there's that guy who's been like searching in the dumpster for the last 10 years for his keys. I feel like it's one of those things where like, if God does not want you to have the money, you will not have the money. So that doesn't mean necessarily that you shouldn't do all of these efforts, right? At the end of the day, that's why we're here. We're here to make the efforts and to do the right thing and to do the best that we can with the information that we have. And also we have to balance that with what our everyday like what we need in our everyday lives, and at the end of the day that the outcome is actually not up to us. And I think if anything, when people think that, right, sometimes they think, okay, I have more anxiety, but the reality is actually that I think that is less anxiety provoking to know that somebody out there, like, our creator is out there caring for us, and putting what we need in front of us, and it makes I think it makes everything a lot easier, in my opinion.
Yeah, I heard this great quote. God will give you challenges, and He will only give you challenges that that you will conquer, but also challenges that challenge you. So, something like that. I probably dosed it off a lot, but something like along those lines. And this makes, even if you just have that in mind, I saw it makes things easier. You're like, oh yeah, I can do that. Even if you don't believe in it, if you just get in this, like, challenges only come your way if you can actually handle them. Otherwise the challenge wouldn't come to you. Then it's like, oh yeah, I can do that. And it made things easier for me. Even though I'm not super religious, I get more religious with the podcast because all my guests are very religious. Not all of them, but I would say a super majority of them are. I learn a lot from that. There's some interesting connection between Bitcoin and religion. Maybe between Bitcoiners and religion, especially Christianity, but like many other religions also.
Yeah, so I mean, I think honestly, so I'm Jewish, and so there's some differences for sure, but there's some main differences. Obviously, there's the main difference that we disagree on about who's Messiah, and then there's other things where there's sort of more nuanced things that are different. The Jewish perspective on life is that we are here to accomplish things, and that we are here actually to elevate the material world. And so I think what happens with Bitcoin actually is a lot of the consumerism and the materialism starts to melt away. And in Judaism, that then gives us an opportunity to elevate what's important, spiritually important in the world, in my opinion. I think from the Christian perspective, it's similar, it's just a little nuanced. And please, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But what I've heard is basically that we're stripping away the material world, and that brings you closer to God. It's not actually about elevating what's in the material world. It's just that once you're stripping away all of that materialism and consumerism and so forth, that now it just gives you more closeness. And that you're more removed from the world, from this world. You're more in the spiritual world. And so I guess you could sort of see how it's slightly different, right? That in Judaism, we're here to elevate what's actually here. And that can be something so simple as you order something on Amazon, maybe, right? I don't know, you order some random food on Amazon, and then we make a blessing before we eat it, and now we've elevated the food, right? I'm just giving a silly example, but we are still on this earth, right? And so you can keep removing all of these layers and so forth. And yes, I do think that will bring you closer to God. But at the end of the day, we still have to be in this material world. So I don't think that Bitcoin in and of itself removes us from the material world. I think it gives us an opportunity to interact in the material world in an elevated way.
That's super interesting. Religion is a big blind spot for me, so I couldn't even tell you any differences between any religions. But it's super interesting to hear, especially those connections in this material world. I have one more question before we get to the end of the podcast. Is probably one of the most watched videos when we talk about that, is the whole thing on retiring on Bitcoin. It's super funny. If this is in the title, it's just people are drawn towards that. Obviously, as people, they want to maybe retire from the job, or they want to retire someone else, or they just want to see, hey, Bitcoin can take care of me, basically. How do you look at that whole thing with someone approaches you oh, hi, here are my assets and I want to retire on Bitcoin, and what are the things to consider with that question also?
Yeah, this is it's definitely it's an all-encompassing question, because there's so many different aspects of financial planning related to retirement, and obviously the rules are going to be different in the U.S. versus other places in the world because of just retirement accounts and so forth, and the tax rules and everything. So I'll try to be a little more basic so it kind of covers everything. But the idea basically is that Bitcoin has doesn't create income, right? We're just holding a money. And so even if you were just holding the dollar, right? And I think the way to compare it would be that you literally just take dollars and you stuff it in your mattress. And then your dollar is not generating anything, right? You just are going to take dollars out of there and then go spend it. It's the same thing with Bitcoin, right? And so people don't like that. Like functionally in their brain, they're like, well, I need my money to generate money. And I'm so used to this fiat world where my money generates money that if I don't put it in a mattress, if I put it here, then all of a sudden I can get a dividend or an interest or whatever it is. So we kind of have that fiat brain in mind, which is fine. I think we live in a fiat world and we're transitioning away from that fiat world, right? But we're still in this fiat world, like we've been talking about. We have to live in reality and so forth. So either we have to flip the script in our mind that says, okay, total return, which is the difference between what I bought Bitcoin with and what it's worth now, is the same as income, right? Like if I have an income generating product and for whatever reason with that income generating product, I was able to get the same return as I was just by holding Bitcoin, then there's no difference between the income generating one and Bitcoin, right? The only difference is that I saw the income move out of the product and into my account and I quote unquote got it in dollars. But the value of the product stayed the same probably. Whereas with Bitcoin, the value quote unquote increased in dollar terms, right? And so because I didn't see that increase actually move out of Bitcoin and into my account, now I'm not considering it yield. And so I think we need to flip the script on total return, but then that also means we have to be okay with selling Bitcoin. And so people, yeah, it's fine. You can work off a total return and you can sell and pay capital gains and so forth. And there might be some advantage even to capital gains than getting income, and in the US at least. So like that's something that people need to look into as far as taxes are concerned. But the other way to approach it would be, okay, now there are all these income generating products out there. I have to evaluate whether or not they make sense given my risk tolerance, time horizon, what I'm trying to accomplish. Do I move out some of my Bitcoin from here, maybe pay capital gains and start getting income? Or do I know that I'm going to be retiring in the future and therefore maybe I just start buying these products so I don't have to generate capital gains so that I can have some income, and then I have like a combination of where I sell some Bitcoin and I have some income from these income generating products. So I think that these are ways of looking at it, and that people need to really be running the numbers on their situation or be working with somebody like me. And this is not me like giving a hard sale or anything here, right? But working with a financial advisor to see how much do I actually need for retirement. Like, and I really mean it in dollar terms of like, okay, what do I need to spend? That doesn't necessarily, it's not the same thing as like how much assets do I need, right? Because like the average financial planner, if they're not, let's say, looking at it in Bitcoin terms, might tell you different numbers versus if you were creating this tailored Bitcoin/preferred portfolio for yourself. So you need to just be mindful about what actually is your spending rate. You need to be mindful that spending is probably going to grow over time, but maybe decrease when you're in, like, there's some research that people stop spending as much money when they're 78, I think, because you just slow down and you do less things. So you can take that into account as well. And running these numbers and then making up a retirement plan. People like rules of thumb, and I happen to think that sometimes rules of thumb just make things worse off. But in general, like, I think that you should be erring on the side of a conservatism and really be trying to spend 2% or less of your stack, depending on your age. And that can increase over time as you age because you have less of a lifespan. And that's one way of looking at it, but also you can start combining some of the things that are out there to make it a little more, bespoke for your situation.
Yeah, I think from the FIRE community, there's this 4% rule. And if your annual expenditure is 4% of your net worth, it makes sense to just like sell that off. But that's also like very hard for me, especially with an asset with Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Because Bitcoin could be at 50K next year, or it could be at 400K next year, which makes those whole calculations way like a lot harder. So maybe with Bitcoin you have to first withdraw 40%, 50% cash, then calculate the 4% rule, and then go from there. And if you have more Bitcoin and it shoots up to $1 million, you're just lucky. You have a better retirement at that point.
Yeah, definitely. What we've also done for clients is that we have sold at like designated price targets. Let's say like 5 years worth of cash, so that we know, okay, we can hold all this Bitcoin and we'll be able to survive any 5-year period basically without having to dip into it. Some people like that because it gives them sort of the knowingness of, okay, this is how much fiat I have and I'm going to budget over this period of time. And I know no matter what, I won't have to dip into my Bitcoin for this number of years. Other people don't like that though, right? Because you might have a large capital gains tax bill in 1 year from doing that, or they don't like the idea of selling all their Bitcoin up front. And so you have to be mindful about like what is appropriate for your situation and how you're going to approach it. I would say the most conservative thing to do, obviously, would be that you sell and have some sort of fiat runway for retirement, because unless you're willing to go back to work, you got to live off of something.
That's very true. How do you actually look at the state pensions that are there? I mean, this is also like very different for everyone who's listening there, because most of them are in the US, but they're also from Europe and Canada, and all different. Every different nation has probably different pension rules and pension things. But traditionally, I think mostly they work the same, as you have the state pension that just is collected and you get it when you are out of work. Then there are some more free ones where you have tax benefits, and then there is the ones that you just do privately. How do you look at the state side of things? Because in Austria we have a huge debate now going on how much they should be increased, where because the government has no money, and Austria also has no money printer, and some other nations, where I see this consensus around young people right now, where they say, yeah, we are still paying in this pension system, but we are very sure we won't ever get anything out of that. Like that's scary. Like people are sure about it. Like my generation is kind of like, hey, yeah, like we won't get a pension like our grandpa is going, and I myself also is like, I just see it as an additional tax at that point, the pension thing that I have to pay, because in Austria there's like a certain percentage in pension that you just have to pay. You cannot get out of it. You can't opt out of it, unfortunately. And this is just like an additional tax to the system, and I plan my own pension.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, especially in Europe, I mean, I'd be shocked if any of the countries are able to deliver on their pensions. And honestly, even here in America, like I know they're going to try to overhaul the system and so forth. Every candidate, I mean, every president has been unsuccessful in doing it. It's very unpopular, obviously, to tell people that, younger people, especially who are paying in, that they're not going to get money. But I, especially young people right now, should just expect that they're not going to get it and save accordingly and be like blissfully surprised when they have extra money later. It's kind of how I like how we're thinking about it for clients, at least. For my older clients, right? For basically clients who are age 60 and up, I think we're kind of assuming at this point that they're going to get it. People in their 50s, who I do have, we're considering that maybe they won't have it, but maybe they'll have some sort of portion of it, that by then maybe benefits will be cut. And anybody under age 50, we don't even ask for it anymore. Honestly, we used to have it be like one of these standard things. Oh, send your social security statement. And now I'm like, I literally don't even care. Like, I'm not gonna what? So you could go on, log in there, and spend a lot of time on there trying to find the statement, only for me to just basically toss in the garbage because in 20 years from now it's not gonna be relevant. You know what I mean? It's like we're not wasting clients' time basically on it. And looking at it more as a gift later. And it's really a sad reality of what's going on with governments, and really just a sad reality of fiat in general, right? I mean, I think that if we weren't off the gold standard and printing like crazy, then we probably wouldn't have these unfunded pensions. But, here we are.
Yeah, and this is also interesting because even if you get a pension, how much will it cover? Because now this year, I think they will increase it. I only have the Austrian numbers. It's probably similar around Europe. It's probably similar, maybe also in America, where they want to increase it 2% this time, and inflation is almost 100% certain higher, like at least in my books. And even the official inflation rate is in Austria higher than the 2%, which is really fun. Even the official ones is higher than that. And the unofficial ones, like if you want to have any sort of nice life with like restaurants or maybe like a nice car, anything like that, all those things are having a way higher inflation rate than what people are calculating with. So like, I don't know. Maybe we get a pension, but it might just pay for one meal a month.
Yeah, for sure. I think though, like for the average person, right? And maybe this is not your audience. Like obviously most people who are listening to your podcast are Bitcoiners, but I mean, the average person really needs to think more in terms of the future of saving, because these obligations are probably not going to be met. And so like I would equate it to, let's say you were a worker you worked on steel beams all day, right? Like if you don't pack your peanut butter and jelly sandwich or whatever it is that you want to eat for lunch, right? And you're up there on those steel beams, you're not going to eat lunch. Right? That's the reality. So like like in the morning, you have to think, okay, not only do I need to make myself breakfast, but I also need to make myself lunch, and I need to pack it in a way where I can get it up on these steel beams so that when I have to eat in the middle of the day and I don't have access to anything else, I have access to food, right? And we need to be and it's a lot harder for people to be thinking about this when they're young, but the reality is that like government is probably not going to provide for you later, and therefore you need to pack that peanut butter and jelly sandwich for 30 years. And that's savings, right? Like that's the whole point of long-term savings. And so I just like, my hope is that it's not just something that is prevalent in the Bitcoin crowd, but really in general, that people are thinking more towards the future, and that, stop prioritizing so much of today, when the reality is that much later you're harder to work and so forth. It's harder to get work. It's harder to maintain work when you're older, or you might have medical conditions or whatever it is that just prohibits you from working when you're later. Like you need to be planning for these things today. And, best case scenario is you oversaved and you live a glorious retirement, right? Worst case scenario is that you're now a burden on your family, friends, and community.
I like the first case more, and I love that comparison, and I might steal it because if you are up there and if you haven't packed lunch there, you can maybe catch a bird, but you won't get food.
Really risking your life to catch that bird,
Desperate situations call for creative solutions, I guess. We have one question to ask each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin? And maybe I add with you besides personal finance.
Yeah. Well, I guess the things I do the most are I do Bitcoin a lot. I have 3 kids, so parenting. I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I've certainly learned a lot from my 3 kids. And yeah, I mean, I probably like a lot of your Bitcoiner crowd. I mean, I refound Judaism about 4.5 years ago, and I've been studying the Bible pretty religiously, for lack of a better word. So I've been doing a lot of that as well. And I think I spend more time on that, honestly, at this point than Bitcoin, because I've been in Bitcoin for so long. It's not that I can't learn more, but I just find that I get more out of studying Torah than Bitcoin things at this point. So, but I will tell people this: if you don't have kids, you're missing out. People who think that they don't need kids because they, whatever it is, they're living their life and kids are a bother. Yeah, kids are going to keep you up at night, and they're going to be challenging, and they are going to spend your money. And you will have less Bitcoin if you have kids. But at the end of the day, the joy that you get from it, the growth that you get from it as a human being, from learning how to like care for more than just yourself, it infinitely affects you as a person and the environment around you, to think about more than just yourself, and to be doing like acts of loving kindness for others, like really out of the goodness of your heart, without expecting anything in return for your children. Like that translates to more than just raising kids. And I've certainly found that for me, and I found that for really anyone that I've known who's had kids. So 100% recommend, go get yourself a husband or wife, and not I mean, just like in general. But yeah, find yourself a spouse, have a bunch of kids, don't wait, and don't plan financially. I'm so sick of people asking me this question: can I afford kids? It's not a financial decision. I'm sorry. Like, I'm not going to be the reason why when you're 45 and you can't have kids anymore, that you're like, well, that Morgen Rochard told me not to have any kids because I'd be worse off financially. Yes, you will be like worse off financially. I don't know what to tell you. Your kids are going to spend your money, but you will get so much more from it that it is worth doing. So please go have kids.
And I heard that recently on a lot of other podcasts, non-Bitcoin podcasts, actually, this kids debate, because I think there are multiple studies out there and they all show the same thing. A single person without husband or wife, without kids, makes less than a married person. And married person with kids make more money than just married person without kids in general, like overall. I think there's this thing where maybe we come back to the challenge that God gives us, where if you are two, you might need more money. If you are 3, 4, in your case, 5 people, you need more money than if you're just the two of you. And so you get creative and you actually do things and you say, hey, like, okay, how can you step up our game? And you take life more serious. You take my maybe career or income or whatever more serious. So there's like, oh yeah, I need more money. That's why I will go ahead and make more money. And
Yeah, totally.
I think weirdly enough, you could make an argument that kids might be a good financial decision. Like weirdly enough.
It's actually also a Jewish belief that every child that you have brings more blessing. And some of that blessing could be monetary and obviously blessings in a lot of other ways. And so there are people actually who have seen like, because, you know, some families have, you know, 6, 7, 8 kids, right? And they saw like a door open, let's say, when they had their 5th kid, where all of a sudden, like, there was all of this, you know, more blessing in the world as a result of that. And so I'm sure like large families can probably even think, like, if they look at it, or even small families where all of a sudden you're like, if you look back, I'm like, okay, what did I make before I had kids? And what did I make after my first or my second kid? That you can see that there was a point where there was an inflection point with blessing, because really God does take care of you at the end of the day.
I believe so too. And that's really cool. And by the way, I think you are an expert with 3 kids on parenting. So I think like if you have 3 kids, you probably know a lot about parenting, that would qualify you as an expert.
I myself an expert because my kids certainly find new ways of challenging me. So I'm still learning, but yes, I'm very good at changing diapers. And I've learned a thing or two, but yeah, especially my oldest challenges me the most, I would say, because like it's always new. Whereas like with my other 2, you've kind of seen it before. So you're like, oh, okay, I think I sort of know what to do in this situation. So yeah, my mom actually used to call your oldest child the practice baby. Just because, like, you know, it's and really true. But you know, they're the oldest kids. They do okay. They get through it.
I hope so, because I'm the one.
You seem to be doing just fine. Your parents practiced on you, and look at you. You've got a successful Bitcoin podcast now. So yeah.
But I heard this one. It's with kids, it's the same with pancakes. The first one always goes wrong. As the oldest one, I allow myself that joke. So really cool. We have an endogen in the podcast that will bring us to a whole different direction now. Endogen of the podcast, where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you a very specific question. I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
Okay.
What should a Bitcoin treasury company do if the MNAV drops under 1? Would you hold your Bitcoin or sell them in order to buy back your stock?
I mean, I personally would probably hold my Bitcoin, but I'm not well versed on what Bitcoin treasury companies should do. I mean, we are involved, you know, tangentially just because clients invest in it and know what's going on in the space. But yeah, I'm definitely not running one. However, I would say that in that situation, you do need to be mindful of your leverage. Because at the end of the day, right, if you actually do need to sell Bitcoin to be able to be in a good situation financially and not be able to have to sell more Bitcoin later as a result of it, then that might be the right choice. But again, over leveraging, like we were talking about earlier, can generally be a problem. So keep that in mind, all of you running those Bitcoin treasury companies out there.
I hope they all do. The good thing with treasury companies, there is more than one person involved in the decision, and I always hope that more people have responsible decisions. But we will see how the whole treasury company thing will evolve. Thank you so much, Morgen, for being on the show. Before I let you go, where can people find you? And next June, also your book.
Yeah. I totally forgot. I'm like the worst at promoting myself. You can find me on X. I'm Morgen with an E Rochard. And my financial planning practice is originwa.com. It's Origin Wealth Advisors. I also have a Bitcoin consulting firm that is moneyowners.com. I'm currently working on a Bitcoin personal finance book. So if you want to get information about when that is coming out, you can go to bitcoinpersonalfinancebook.com. I'm working with Wiley right now. I'm furiously writing, and I'm hoping to have my manuscript done by the end of this year so it could be out in June of next year. I did write a personal finance book that's not Bitcoin focused, but has a lot of really good information out there for people looking to fine tune their personal financial situation. And you can kind of layer Bitcoin on top of that. There is a small Bitcoin section in there, but it's not about Bitcoin like my next book is going to be. That is the Personal Finance Quick Start Guide. You can find it on Amazon. Thanks for having me. This is super fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.